CMPS 294, Intro to HTML, Part 1.
Alright everyone, let's go through the Intro to HTML sort of presentation. There will be a lot of presentations like this. We're going to go about 23 slides deep into this presentation, and then I'll stop the video and we'll have a different video for the continuation of the intro and then the advanced HTML and so on and so forth. And I'll try to keep them relatively short. This one might be a little bit longer because of the initial explanation of things. So the first thing that we want to make sure that we have is that we've got brackets open. I currently have an index.html file started in my CMPS 294 directory, but you can really put it wherever you want as long as you keep track of it. I'm going to minimize this so we can just see code. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so that the code is a little bit more readable. And what I also am going to do is I'm going to click the lightning bolt right here, and what that's going to do is, I already had this open, but it should create a tab, sort of a Google, a Gmail tab, or a Chrome tab rather, so that once I start typing, it'll render over here. So cool, now that we've got that set up, let's go back to this and start the thing. So we're going to talk about the HTML overview. Specifically, we're going to talk about what HTML is, look at some example, just real basic example HTML, and then start breaking into the basics of HTML. And the basics of HTML is going to consist of tags, entities. You know, we're going to get pretty deep in this very first sort of presentation. And then moving forward, once we get to advanced HTML, we'll really start looking at classes and attributes and some heavier things, more structured HTML5 type stuff. Now, this is just for HTML. We plan on going into CSS and JavaScript and separate sections of the class, but this will get us started. So let's break into it. So what is HTML? Now, HTML is an acronym. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And we can break that down into two separate pieces. Hypertext, which is technically text on a screen that has links to other text or other content that can be delivered progressively. And this is sort of an old definition. It was developed a long time ago. And then markup language, which is a way of annotating a document so that the content is distinguishable from the syntax of the document. We look at things like YAML, XML, and then of course HTML. Anything that typically has tags that can, based off of the tags, can denote a certain type of data or certain formats for that data can be a markup language. Now in HTML's case, they are saved as HTML or HTM files. Back in the day there used to be a difference, but now there's no difference. HTM and HTML files are sort of the same with the HTML5 sort of standard. So this is some example HTML. At the very top we've got not doc type HTML, which is, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but the opening HTML tag with the accompanying close HTML tag sort of at the bottom right down here. An opening head tag, an opening title tag, example HTML as text, and then a closing title and a closing head tag, and then an open close body tag with hello world inside of it. So I keep saying tags. Tags are little sort of, some paired, some not, syntactical sort of differentiators that represent HTML elements. A lot of the times they come in pairs, but sometimes they don't. Some pairs are things like strong, which are sort of the replacement for bold. It makes the text darker. And then the paragraph tag, which allows you to format certain things like text or articles or whatever. There are some tags that don't come in pairs. For instance, the break line tag or carriage return tag, BR, and the horizontal rule tag are completely just by themselves. And they're not the only ones, but they're the ones that we're going to look at a little bit in this presentation. So we also have HTML comments, and I'm not going to comment most of this because I'm narrating it, but I might require you to comment some of your code. And in that case, just understand that comments in HTML work just like comments in, you know, in any other language that you've ever dealt with. They aren't rendered down. They don't actually affect the source code or the end result of how the code functions, but understands that even though the comments are rendered and don't have any effect on the outcome, you can still see the comments when the source is inspected. So the way that we do that is open, or I guess, you know, greater than, exclamation point, dash, dash, or hyphen, hyphen, whatever the comments are, and then to close it, dash, dash, less than. And or greater than rather. And it's not uncommon to have comments that are left in sort of source code. They're typically used, especially if you have a lot of developers or a lot of web designers on one project that are going to be sort of cross-collaborating or whatever. It might be nice to just, leave a comment in there to see what they're doing. We could even see that on Southeastern's website. If we open up Southeastern and we inspect element on their site, we can see that there is a lot of commented out code. We see that there's actually, it looks like some instructions on what to give them, what to do. So not too, it's not like it's not crazy when you find it. They're frequently there. Okay, so here is some the same code, and we can see that we've tagged up and sort of color-coded the start and the end of these. If we swap back to, give me a second, swap back to brackets, and I just copy and paste that code in there. Notice it doesn't color code it, but it does help us format it. We can see that it just says hello world. It actually did update what the header here is. So if I change something, notice how it changes over here. Okay, so we can see that there's start and end. When I select these, brackets is letting me sort of helping me highlights for them to show them off. Okay. Now we looked at this doc type HTML, right? Doc type is called the document type declaration, and this effectively is telling your browser that whatever document it has in it, it conforms to a certain number of standards, specifically the HTML5 standards, and that's what this is, saying HTML right there. It can conform to other HTML versions though. If we wanted to say this conforms to HTML4 or 4.1 or something like that, then we would just replace the doc type HTML tag with some other tag. We'd put a different version in there. We won't need to do that. It'll always be doc type HTML. And I could take this out. I could say no doc type HTML. And notice how this still renders. I could still, do stuff. It's still there. It's not that it will break the browsers. It's that you would then get some sort of, you wouldn't be as valid as you would be if you declared that I am in fact an HTML5 website or an HTML5 web page. So again, some browsers require it. I think Opera may require it, or it used to. IE used to freak out if you didn't have it. But in this case, doc type HTML is very sort of almost vanity at this point. Now I imagine once we start getting deeper into HTML5, we'll discover some things that we can't do without that being there, or maybe we won't. Honestly, every piece of source code I have I'll expect you to have doc type HTML in there. So okay, but let's look at some of the tags that we have highlighted here, specifically the HTML tags, the head, title, and the body tag. So HTML, these are our really basic sort of almost the bare minimum tags that we need or that we require to have for a site to function. Now, I say that the bare minimum required for a site to function, but truth be told, you don't necessarily need an HTML tag, and you may not need a header tag. You could just start with a body and it would render down. In fact, I think we can try that right here. If we just got rid of our HTML tags and we got rid of our head tags, notice it's still there. That's not good though. Just because it does allow you to do that doesn't mean that it's okay for you to do that. So let's look through some of the basic tags that we're required to use. The HTML open and close tags, they contain all of the page content. So anything that's going to go on the web page needs to be within these HTML sort of tags. Again, the exception is right now doc type, the document type declaration, can go above it. So anything outside of these tags won't render, with the exception of that and a few other things that we'll get to much later. Inside the HTML, we have the head tags. These contain metadata about the HTML. These are things that may not appear on the page, but they're things that the browser, search engines, other things will use to help differentiate your page from other pages and sort of figure out what your page is all about. It used to be really important that you had things called keywords in your head section. Now, not so much. Gmail or Google rather, Google search algorithms don't really look at that, but there are a few other things that do need to be in the head of the document that we're going to get to a little bit later that that simply are data about data on your page, and that's what metadata is. Inside the head section of our page, we have the title tags. The title tags define the page title. So specifically, it defines what says what's up here in this tab, or on my start I guess taskbar or something. It's the name of the page. They exist inside the header area, the head area, and they are required. I say they're required. That's more of a requirement for this course than a requirement for HTML to function properly. You just saw that we destroyed everything except the body tags, and it worked fine. So it's not required in order to function, but it is required for this course. And then the body tags literally contains all of the page content. So anything that you're going to see in the bulk of the main area of the page, this is inside the body tags. So those aren't all the tags, though. There are hundreds of HTML tags that we have. Specifically, heading tags. These are the 6 sets of tags that define important headings. They start at H1, which is the largest and most important tag, and they go all the way down to tag H6, which is the least important. And we use this to sort of help structure and index our page, right? Because search engines actually are using this to index the site structure and all of our content using the headings, because the more important the heading, the more important that content. That's not entirely true all the time. We're going to look at some HTML5 things much later that sort of help out a little bit more than just the H1 to H6 heading tags, but they are important, and they do have uses whenever you look at them, thematic uses. Margins are automatically added by your browser, and typically what we'd like to do is we'd like to use these with horizontal rules. These are effectively the HR tag that puts a horizontal line on the screen. So we've got some source code right here, and I've already copied and pasted this. I'll give you a second to look at it, and we're going to go over to brackets and just paste that in. And we see that it renders 6 different sort of, that's weird. It still has hello world up there. Let me see if I can turn on. Maybe it's because I deleted the body. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So we see that I'm important at H1 is much larger than all of the other ones. Me 2 is a little bit smaller. Me 3 is a little bit smaller than that one. I'm still count right. Nobody loves me. Do I even exist? So we see that, and then the horizontal lines that are kind of going between them. Thanks for the horizontal lines, guys. Good job. So we can just see that there are some thematic elements with that. Oh, another nice thing about this live code editor is that you can see sort of the container that you're in just by highlighting some of the stuff. That's neat. Well, I like that. That makes me smile. All right. Moving on, we've got paragraph, line break, and the pre-formatted tags. So paragraphs are used to display text, and they're just denoted by a open tag p, close tab /p, the syntax. Now, the great thing is that these guys add sort of pre-formatted, I guess, spacing. So they're already the content's automatically put on another line by itself. There's a little bit of space above and below, sort of some padding, some movement around like that. It looks really good. You could change all that, of course, but the downside is that they don't render extra white spaces or new lines or whatever. So we see right here where we get hello space, 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 lots of spaces, world. That's really just going to be hello world. It's going to look like one space between it. Now what we can do is we can actually render things as they appear, or as we want them to appear, using things like line breaks and then the pre-formatted tag, which actually preserves white space and lines. So let's go ahead and look at this code. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this code and I'm going to put it right in the middle of our body tag. So I'm going to do that. And it looks like have to keep relaunching this every time because I'm copy and pasting a lot. I think it's because I'm destroying the HTML tags that I'm having to go back and do that. So when we look at it, we see that this is a paragraph, not too bad. We see that without help, it can't format line breaks. And of course, even though it doesn't appear to be on one line here, it does here. Without help, it can't format line breaks. Now, we say without help, line break. It can format line breaks, which is good because it says with help. It goes to the next line. Fine. It can format line breaks, and then I add about 9 spaces here, but not white space. And it even says it, but not white space. And it just runs all together. Now the cool thing is with the pre-formatted tag, we can do that. And it's actually getting all of these tabs right there. It's sort of getting the whole thing. Let's see. So, you know, I'm messing all this up. Anyway, so the pre-formatted tag is really nice because it gets everything just as is. So it's actually running the entire thing like that, including all of this white space right there. And again, there are other ways to sort of change the way this looks. I think there's code, SAMP, and then keyboard input. So we can see that's exactly what we got. So the nice thing is that pre-formatted tags, or any tag that inside of content that's inside the pre-formatted tag, uses what's called a fixed width font. And I don't know if you noticed it, but before this W, it looks like the W is wider than IT and even a space because these aren't fixed width fonts. Some letters are wider than others. However, if it's pre-formatted, that font is going to be exactly 1 unit wide. So we can see right here that, you know, this less than sign is just as wide as this C or as this exclamation point or whatever. And in fact, we could probably take this exact thing, paste it, and fix it. And we see that the W, the same W that was up here, but because it's in a pre-formatted tag, the W is exactly 1 character width wide. So keep that in mind. We also have the fact that I did it, and I didn't really explain it, but I'm explaining it now. Through entities, and entities are really just sort of, I guess these pre-rendered, or not pre-rendered, they're these items that you can't use. They're sort of reserved because they're already used somewhere else. So for instance, in the example, I am using entities to sort of paint these greater than and less than signs, because if I was to try to put, instead of that, if I was to try to put just open, close, pre, what that's going to do is it's going to try to, like, it's not going to render it as as actual text. And you know, I could probably do this, and that doesn't really do it. So the only way around that is using the entities, and the way to do that is ampersand, and then you have a number of entities. So let's see, less than, and then pre, and then another one to close it, which would be ampersand, greater than, and there we go. That's how we do it. Now, there are a lot of these things. There are some basic ones, and then there are some not so basic ones. For instance, the a really basic one is effectively, it's called non-breaking space, and it's and symbol NBPC, non-breaking space, and that is like 1 white space or something. It'll also keep 2 words from being separated on the page, things that would look weird separated. There are a lot, though. I'm gonna go here. These are just some of them, and I can scroll through them, but there are a ton. For every little thing, you can see the side of my scroll wheel, just lots of stuff, all by putting in these codes, the entity codes. Cool. We're almost to the end of the first video. We see that you know, we haven't been formatting things other than just, you know, moving them around space-wise or whatever, but sometimes you're going to want to take basic text and you're going to want to format it with some sort of meaning, some emphasis or whatever. And we've got 3 specific formatting elements that we can use: strong, emphasized, and underlined. So strong is just simply strong. Emphasize is EM, and then underlined is U. So previously, strong and emphasized wasn't in HTML, and instead it was bold and italicized, B and I. Now B and I still work, but strong and emphasized are thematic, semantical sort of element descriptors, whereas B and I are purely visual. And the difference is semantic elements, and we're going to address this a little bit later, but semantical elements are, like I said, thematic. They have meaning about the elements on the page. And that meaning doesn't mean that it means something for the visitor to the page. It means that it means something to search engines. It means something to, to the browser. And then the browser can actually act on it. HTML5 is big on semantical thematics. So here's some example HTML. I added a block quote. We're going to go ahead and look at that just temporarily. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. We can see that, again, when I reformat and redo the live coding. If I was typing all this out, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But we can see it says, okay, well, sometimes science is more art than science, Morty. A lot of people don't get that, by Rick Sanchez. The block quote was able to sort of put it all in a nice area with kind of spacing on either side. But we can see that science and art and the lot is emphasized, and just how it sort of changes it up a little bit. Nothing really crazy. And again, we can change how these, later when we talk about styling, we can change how strong and underline and emphasize appear. Even block quotes, we can do some stuff with block quotes a little bit later with styling to change the way it looks, so that it doesn't just look like, it's spaced it a little bit, but it is nice. And these are thematic, so if I wanted to pull out all the really big deal words on a page, it might look at all the strong words or all the emphasized words to try and figure out what it's going to deem the page is talking about. There are also other ways of sort of looking at formatting your content using code, SAMP, and KBD, which is keyboard. And we can go ahead and experiment a little bit with that just real quick. So if I was to come in here and say code, this is some code, beep boop. Versus also some stuff. Notice it put it on the same line, and then keyboard. This is typed stuff. So they all look virtually the same. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them on different lines just so that we can see side by side that they are almost the same. I think the nice thing is that they're all individual. So this, this code is specifically supposed to be used to kind of outline or highlight computer code or whatever, sample output from something, and then keyboard input. The fact that they look all the same doesn't really bother me. We'll have to experiment around with these a little bit later. All right, that is the very first presentation. We're about halfway done with the first bit of material. What I'd like everyone to do is go back through the presentation, and if there's any point in the presentation that you don't understand, that you don't get, make sure to work on that, because if there are any questions, you need to make me aware of it. If there are any misunderstandings, let's try to knock them out right now, because it's only going to get more convoluted and crazy from this point on. Expect to find an assignment in your Moodle section for the combined course section. Remember the 01 to 02 combined course in Moodle. That will be relating to some of this. It'll be maybe an online assignment, like a Q&A type thing, or it might be generate some example HTML and copy and paste it in Moodle or something. Nothing really crazy, just something to sort of verify that you've looked through this and that you kind of understand it. Again, if you have any questions, look me up, check me out on mg@selu.edu. Send me an email, ask me your question. If you need to meet in person during office hours, we can do that too. But other than that, I'll make the other presentation. This will be uploaded, and then in a couple days later, the other presentation will be uploaded. Watch this, watch that one, and stay on top of it. Don't get lazy. And I guess I'll see you guys later.
And I was like, baby, don't like, baby, don't like, baby, oh, I thought you'd always be mine.